Hey everyone, it's Evangeline. I'm so happy that you're tuning in with me this week for our story time. This Sunday we'll be studying the scripture from Matthew that is basically the golden rule. Now I'm sure that you could say the golden rule without me having to say it. Treat others like you want to be treated. How do I want to be treated? How can I do that for other people? What if it's really, really hard to treat other people that way? What if I see people in the world who are not being treated like I'm treated? What should I do? Our story today is called The Other Side. It's written by one of my favorite children's book authors, Jacqueline Woodson, and the illustrator is E.B. Lewis. Now look at the cover, The Other Side. Why do you think the title is The Other Side? Oh yes, I see. There's a fence here. They're on other sides of the fence. Have you ever had to be on the other side of something? Have you ever been left out from something you wanted to be a part of? Now there's a special page at the beginning of this book that I want to share with you. It's called the author's note. Sometimes authors want to explain a little bit more about their story. They want to tell a little bit more about what they were thinking or why they wrote the story. So I want to share Jacqueline Woodson's note with you here. She says, "Years ago, when I began to tell the story of Clover and Annie," that's these two girls on the cover, "I had no idea about the life this book would take on. I knew two things. One, that I wanted this to be a story about the way in which young people change the world each day through their seemingly simple acts of resistance." Resistance. What does that word make you think of? And two, that I wanted it to be a lyrical story that brought with the telling hope. I needed that hope. By the time I sat down and began to tell this story, I'd traveled all over the country and to many places outside the country as well. As I began to really see the world, I realized that so much of it was still segregated, despite the work of Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. Always I would say, what about right here in the classroom? What about right here in this classroom? And slowly, the young people would begin to look around and notice, perhaps for the first time, that there is still work to do. People often ask me if I think the fence is down. Down? No. Lower? Definitely. In the years since The Other Side was published, the world has changed. Our country elected its first president of color. This was hard to imagine even 10 years ago. But we imagined it. And it happened, just as Clover and Annie imagined a fenceless world. Each time I pick up The Other Side and begin reading it to young people, I see in their faces their own eagerness to knock down the fences in their lives. And I am filled with such an amazing sense of hope and pride. Who knows what their worlds will be like when The Other Side turns 20, 30, 50? Imagine. That summer, the fence that stretched through our town seemed bigger. We lived in a yellow house on one side of it. White people lived on the other. And Mama said, "Don't climb over that fence when you play." She said it wasn't safe. You see the fence? That summer there was a girl who wore a pink sweater, and each morning she climbed up on the fence and stared over at our side. Sometimes I stared back, and she never sat on that fence with anybody, that girl didn't. Look how far apart they are. Once, when we were jumping rope, she asked if she could play, and my friend Sandra said no without even asking the rest of us. I don't know what I would have said. Maybe yes, and maybe no. Has something like that ever happened to you? Maybe you see someone else who's being unkind and you're just not sure what to say? I know, for me, it can be hard. It can be hard to speak up and to be brave in that moment. It can be hard to think about, what could I say to help this person? What could I say to do the right thing right now? It's so important though, isn't it? That summer, everyone and everything on the other side of that fence seemed far away. When I asked my mama why, she said, because that's the way things have always been. Sometimes, when me and Mama went into town, I saw that girl with her mama. She looked sad sometimes, that girl did. Don't stare, my mama said. It's not polite. It rained a lot that summer. On rainy days, that girl sat on the fence in a raincoat. She let herself get all wet and acted like she didn't even care. Sometimes I saw her dancing around in puddles, splashing and laughing. Mama wouldn't let me go out in the rain. That's why I bought you rainy day toys, my mama said. You stay inside here where it's warm and safe and dry. But every time it rained, I looked for that girl, and I always found her. Somewhere near the fence. Someplace in the middle of the summer, the rain stopped. When I walked outside, the grass was damp, and the sun was already high up in the sky, and I stood there with my hands up in the air. I felt brave that day. I felt free. Wow, look how happy she is. I got close to the fence and that girl asked me my name. Clover, I said. My name's Annie, she said. Annie Paul. I live over yonder, she said, by where you see the laundry. That's my blouse hanging on the line. She smiled then. She had a pretty smile. And then I smiled, and we stood there looking at each other, smiling. It's nice up on this fence, Annie said. You can see all over. I ran my hand along the fence. I reached up and touched the top of it. A fence like this was made for sitting on, Annie said. She looked at me sideways. I wonder why she looked at her sideways. What was she trying to communicate with Clover when she looked at her sideways after saying that? My mama says I shouldn't go on the other side, I said. My mama says the same thing, but she never said nothing about sitting on it. Neither did mine, I said. These girls are breaking the rules here, aren't they? Both of their moms said that they couldn't sit on the fence, but here they are. They're gonna sit on the fence together. Now, think about what might happen if Annie's mom finds out that she's breaking the rule. What might happen to Clover if Clover's mom finds out? Sometimes there are rules in our world that don't make a lot of sense, do they? Have you ever noticed there's a rule that needs to be broken? That summer, me and Annie sat together on that fence. And when Sandra and them looked at me funny, I just made believe I didn't care. That must have taken a lot of courage. Must have taken a lot of courage for Clover to go up there and sit with Annie on the fence when all of her friends are saying she shouldn't. When her mom's saying she shouldn't. When she could have gotten in a lot of trouble. Some mornings my mama watched us. I waited for her to tell me to get down from that fence before I break my neck or something. But she never did. I see you made a new friend, she said one morning. And I nodded. And Mama smiled. Wait a minute, I was not expecting that. Were you expecting that? I did not think that Clover's mama would start smiling about her playing with Annie. That summer, me and Annie sat on that fence and watched the whole wide world around us. One day, Sandra and them were jumping rope near the fence, and we asked if we could play. I don't care, Sandra said. And when we jumped, Sandra and me were partners the way we used to be. When we were too tired to jump anymore, we sat up on the fence, all of us in a long line. Someday, somebody's going to come along and knock this old fence down, Annie said. And I nodded. Yeah, I said, someday. What do you think? Does someone knock that fence down? What if Annie and Clover and Sandra and all of the other friends knocked the fence down themselves? There'd probably be some people that are pretty upset about that, huh? But it seems like they really want to be together, don't they? Now that we've read this story together, let's go back to that scripture we talked about from Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. Do unto others as you want them to do unto you. Or, you should treat people in the same way that you want people to treat you. How did Clover and Annie treat each other in this story? Was it easy? Sometimes it was easy, and seems like sometimes it felt pretty hard. I'm excited to continue our conversation about this scripture, the Golden Rule, as we join together in Sunday school this Sunday. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll see you later. Mwah! Goodbye!